I often forget that when I put out these videos, there are so many awesome people out there who have actually experienced firsthand some of the things that I talk about in my videos. Take part 1 of my Perth Airport video, for example, where this lovely gentleman named Michael Hayden regaled me with some informative memories about his time working at the Flight Service Centre at Perth Airport. It's interesting to know the context behind the construction of some of these upgrades. Like, did you know that the original terminal building at Perth Airport was actually built in readiness for the 1962 Commonwealth Games? Which, if we have a look at the medal tally for a sec, and yep, just as I suspected, the terminal may have been the only thing that any other competing country saw in Australia that they found nice, because it looks like the Aussies absolutely whooped everyone. And as you can see from the games happening as we speak in 2022, yep, nothing's changed at all. Alright, let's get back on track, shall we? So, where were we again? So I think I mentioned something about Chicken Run and Liam Hemsworth. Oh, yep, you know what? Qantas has just moved into the freshly upgraded Terminals 3 and 4. Funnily enough, despite these streamlining upgrades in 2018, the COVID pandemic has put a stop to any Qantas transit through Perth. Yep, despite adding border security provisions for international travel, Perth's lockdowns were so extensive that not even Qantas was allowed to use Perth as a transit point to continue flights to the European continent through the pandemic. But we'll get to that later in the video. First, let's summarise what Perth Airport looks like right now as you watch this video. The airport has 4 terminals, with an additional 5th general aviation terminal situated to the north of the aerodrome. Terminal 1, the original international terminal, which still operates flights internationally, is situated at the southeast of the airfield directly above Terminal 2, which is the primary terminal for Virgin Australia's domestic operations. Then to the northwest of the airfield lies Terminals 3 and 4, both of which are operated by Qantas, though other international airlines also use these terminals when transiting through Perth to other countries. Terminal 4, along with the General Aviation Terminal, is used by QantasLink, Cobham Aviation along with other fly-in fly-out charter companies for moving mine workers in and out of mines throughout Western Australia. The aerodrome contains 2 runways, 0321 North-South and 0624 East-West. During the COVID pandemic, Perth Airport completed 2 projects in line with the smaller 2014 Perth Airport Master Plan. The first was the fresh addition of self-service check-in kiosks, or as Perth Airport rudely calls them, common user self-service. Like, who are you calling common, mate? To be honest, to use one of those things, you need to be anything but common. It's the kind of experience that allows even a 16-year-old tech savvy to feel exactly the way their grandparents feel when they need help setting up their email on their iPad. The second project was the upgrading of gates 52, 53 and 54 at a cost of $33 million. The project involved adding elevators, escalators and extra corridors to streamline the boarding or disembarking processes. I have to say, I'm impressed that $33 million got them more than one single escalator, because those things cost almost more than the price of petrol nowadays. As we saw from part 1, the airport is well connected to Perth's roadway infrastructure, and the airport also has a pretty decent viewing deck. Now, I've actually glossed over something here because, as I mentioned before, Perth Airport actually produced a master plan in 2014 that detailed some projects that have actually already been completed, namely the self-service counters and the gate upgrades. Isn't it kind of sad that I'm actually surprised by that? Like, man, these projects take a monstrous amount of time, and in Australia, these projects are almost always delayed. And you'd probably think, oh yeah, well, the master plan always sets an unrealistic completion date anyway. Wrong! Look at Chicago O'Hare's runway reconfiguration. That project was initially slated to be completed by 2028. It's now 2022, and not only have they completed the critical portion of the project, but they are 3 years ahead of schedule, expected to finish in 2025. And if I may use a non-airport analogy here, there's an example of how quickly something can come together if there's an unprecedented need for it. In 2020, near the beginning of the pandemic, the Chinese built an entire hospital in 10 days. 10 days! The project was literally named Mission Impossible by the Chinese authorities. Now, granted, something built over 10 days is likely to be as structurally sound as a crack addict's makeshift pirate ship. No, that's an actual thing. Seriously. Now look, this is a whole rabbit hole that I could go down, and I could go full Fred Mills from the B1M in this video, but maybe I'll save it for another video down the line. It's great food for thought though. So Perth Airport's 2014 master plan hinted at some great long-term projects that were then eventually slated into the 2020 master plan. That plan of which really is the perfect source for a Vince McMahon meme. In fact, let's put together one now to represent the absolute boatload of planned works for Perth in this 2020 master plan project. That was surprisingly fun to make, I've got to say. So yes, as you can see, there's a few pretty huge ideas in the pipeline at Perth Airport, and the first and most obvious project is the aerodrome noise reduction. I've spoken about this before with other videos, but in Australia, aerodrome noise pollution levels are monitored closely by Air Services Australia. In the case of Perth Airport, the noise concerns that exist stem from the current approach patterns in place of arriving aircraft. Here's a contour map produced by the project team that maps the areas most affected by aircraft noise pollution. Each colour represents a certain number of noise events, which is a polite way of saying complaints. Now, if we look specifically at the takeoff and approach area for runways 21 and 24, we can see that noise levels are far higher than that of 04 and 06. Now, to any person that looks at this, on the surface, it's easy to see that those two approaches are affecting less populated areas of the city of Perth. And I'm sure that somewhere down the line, compromises had to be made by the airfield operators, and that the lesser of two bad options was to use 21 and 24 as the primary ends for takeoff and landing, weather permitting obviously. But it doesn't change the fact that this is a huge amount of noise that is affecting a decent portion of Perth residents, even if it's less of a problem in the most densely populated areas of the city. So for that reason, there's a few necessary safeguards being put in place to limit and reduce the noise going forward. The first element to these limitations is something called ground running. It's something I'd never really considered with noise levels until reading Perth's 2020 master plan. Essentially, as a critical part of the maintenance process for aircraft, engineers will perform engine testing known as ground running. It generates a significant amount of noise, but is an essential element to the aircraft maintenance process. Luckily, Perth Airport does not house any major airline maintenance facilities, so it's an issue that is seen less frequently. Regardless, they have established the engine ground running management plan to account for any ground running that may need to happen. And really, the main part of the plan is ensuring that the running happens in the hours of daylight when noise is less of a worrisome factor. Then there's the web-based interactive aircraft noise information portal developed by Perth Airport in 2014 to relay updated noise management information to residents on an ongoing basis. They advertise this website to the residents that are most heavily affected by aircraft noise. As of yet, there is no real plan to add noise diversion infrastructure like the stuff that exists at airports like Melbourne or Sydney. It really does help that the airport backs onto a large industrial precinct. Okay, hopefully that's enough depth for you guys. I really wanted to show you how intricate the noise pollution issue is, not just in Perth, but in airports all around the world. Then you've got the project that just last week was publicised on news outlets across Australia, the Forestfield Airport Rail Link. Being a work that involves public infrastructure, the project is almost entirely state government funded, to the tune of around $2 billion. The rail link will connect Perth Airport to the city via the inner suburbs. Now, the reason that it's been publicised now and not in 2016 when the project had initially been hinted at is because the project is nearly complete. That's right, yet again, Perth's airport master plan is coming into fruition within the original timeline set for the project. So yes, services are expected to begin in October, just shy of 2 months from now. And now we get to the heavy duty projects. The projects so large that there are some elements to them that are still simply just ideas with no real hard plans in place for how they will come into fruition. The first of two major projects that are hyped up in the 2020 master plan is the airport consolidation proposal. You see, Perth Airport has commissioned countless studies and analyses into how to best design the airport's expansion to ensure that traffic patterns will reduce noise, apron and taxiway movements are the most efficient and do not become congested, and also just ensuring that the user experience, i.e. the passenger's experience at the airport, is seamless and stress-free. What these studies have determined is the best way to meet these criteria is to move all airport operations to a single zone. That's terminals 1 through to 4, all consolidated within the same area that lies directly in between the second major project element, the parallel runways. Hand in hand, these two projects will completely transform Perth Airport into a more efficiently operated airport that can easily be expanded upon further into the long term, as well as accommodating for the continual growth in traffic that the airport is seeing. The plan is for a parallel north-south runway to be built here, with terminals 1 and 2 being majorly expanded on to create a 4-terminal mega hub for all airline operations at the airport. As this is still a developing plan, there is no rock-solid estimate on how much something like this would cost, but put it into perspective that it cost the airport $33 million for a few escalators. Then use that to determine just how much you think Perth Airport is going to be coughing up to get these projects over the line. Okay, so I've mentioned two interesting things in this deep dive into Perth Airport that I said I would come back to later in this video. So here we are. My first point is in reference to the fun little drama-filled month where heads clashed over unpaid apron and parking fees. In the beginning of the pandemic, back in April of 2020, Virgin Australia was placed into administration. And while its future was being determined, Perth Airport, being the badass operators that they are, decided that because Virgin Australia owed them a portion of the $7 billion overall owed to a range of creditors, they would park some of their airside tractors in front of the aircraft to stop them from leaving, essentially seizing what they believed to be collateral for debts owed. Once Virgin Australia came out the other side of its trip down the drain, the matter was resolved and Perth Airport eventually got its money back. The second point is around Qantas's ongoing battle with Perth Airport over landing fees and general apron charges. Perth Airport argued that they poured a significant amount of money and assets into creating this grand, super streamlined integrated Terminals 3 and 4 for seamless transit for Qantas flights hopping overseas via Perth. The result of this is that Perth increased the landing and apron fees for Qantas flights kind of in the same spirit of a toll road to have Qantas slowly pay their share of the development costs over time. The problem is, Qantas have decided to completely ignore that fact and refuse to pay any increased fees. The matter was taken to court earlier this year where a judge ruled mostly in favour of Perth Airport, meaning that the fees for Qantas continue to stay slightly higher than the fees for other airlines. So, over two parts, I have presented to you everything that there is to know about Perth Airport from start to finish. And let me just slate a follow-up video on Perth for about 2 years' time, because there will be enough changes in the next 2 years to warrant taking another visit to Western Australia. That's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Please consider subscribing. The larger this channel grows, the more I can put into these videos. I appreciate you all, and I'll see you in the next video.